If you lived during the late 90s and spent any time playing games, this music should be an instant nostalgia hit. I mean, straight to the brain, straight to the heart, all the feels. Goldeneye 007 for the N64. Not Goldeneye 64, as I've been calling it for years. No, 007. Developed by Rare and released in 1997, this single-stick shooter was born for family TVs and college dorm rooms, sibling rivalries, and late-night slapfests. It brought competitive multiplayer shooters, until then the sole realm of PC junkies, to consoles. And even if you set the multiplayer aside for just a minute, the single player was a revelation as well. Destructible environments, objectives that changed with the difficulty, and a solid recreation of the source material made GoldenEye 007 an all-around stunner. But not anymore. Time and progress has worn away the fringes of this game and exposed janky elements. We all know the game's defects, and they're not worth repeating here in this intro. Most of my guests will do so in the body of this episode. But a question comes out of all this. One I hope we answer over the next 40 or so minutes. How can a game be so beloved and at the same time universally dismissed? Has our nostalgia for the past clouded our objectivity? Or are we allowing unfair comparisons to modern game design and aesthetics simply just ruin our fun? Time to load your silenced PP7 and throw on your snazziest suit as we infiltrate the memories of GoldenEye 007. To start us off on our personal journeys through GoldenEye, Bobby, my brother, shares how him and I used to play the game at home, and then Greg Seward from the Player One podcast and the Generation 16 YouTube series brings a different perspective to the conversation. We can't talk about the N64 without talking about GoldenEye.
Oh, of course.
You can't take it. It can take a few minutes to chat about it. I love GoldenEye. Have you tried to play it recently-ish with like with the N64 controller?
About within the last 2 years or so, I did pop it in. Yeah,
it's nigh impossible. It is not. Yeah, I can't. I tried it at a video game convention a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And there's times there I just sit down with it and I'm like, how did we navigate 3D space? The first person shoot. Where's my second stick? I need that.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's so hard to get my hand around.
You have to hold the R button to aim, but you're not walking. Yep.
Right.
I think there's a way you can walk, but it's clunky. The graphics do not hold up. I mean, it's insane to think how great we thought that was. Something happens to you when you play that game now, if you haven't played it in a while, and I recommend your audience doing this, because when you first pop it in and you see that Rare logo, and you see and you start hearing the music, it's a hip hop version of the GoldenEye theme, basically.
Right.
It has like the more modern of the time of those movies, and you start hearing those that are familiar. You see the files, and you click your mission, and you hear those familiar sounds and that familiar music, and you're like, the nostalgia waves over you. And then you start to level in that first song, that very repetitive loop, but it's rocking. And it's got, and like, oh, I remember this like it was yesterday. I can't believe this. And then you play it, and it's not as good as you. No. It's really
it
not.
Really isn't.
It's really
it was
not.
It was remarkable for the time, but boy,
dude,
I mean,
well,
the big
two things for the time. Yes, it was very big for the time, and it played very well for its time. Again, like Turok, trying to do first-person shooters on a console was always a challenge. And I'll say to this day, we nailed it. I will say Nintendo nailed it when they did Metroid Prime. That was probably the best experience playing on a console with first person.
Yes.
I'll always remember that. But before that, we were working towards that. And GameCube was a distant thing in the future.
Yes.
So N64, to make that work, it was always a trial by error, but they made strides. I think Turok, and I think even GoldenEye did too, because it was less blocky, less clunky like Duke Nukem. But at the same time, playing it now, it's tough. But I still go through the levels pretty good. I still grab that sniper rifle like time never passed, and I'm like, I'm blowing through the levels pretty fast. Like,
okay,
yeah. So I didn't have a hard time playing it, but it's a weird experience playing it now. But everyone, even the most casual gamer, has such a memory playing that game.
Oh yeah. Did you ever play Goldeneye?
You know what? I did, and I was not a Goldeneye fan. I never have been. It's funny because I want to blame that on sort of the single stick shooter, and that's the problem. But then I look back at things like Medal of Honor on the PlayStation, and I absolutely loved those games. I will say that I got into Perfect Dark. I was a fan of Perfect Dark at first. I've gone back and tried to play that recently, and it doesn't hold up. But yeah, no, never a Goldeneye fan.
Yeah, GoldenEye's not a good game. I loved it when I was a kid, right? Because again, everybody remembers multiplayer. Remember the 4 controller ports on the N64 were so important.
Oh, they were game changers for sure.
Game changer, yeah, because it turned that system. That was, if without that, it would have been a very average. No one would have cared. Adding 4 controllers for your Mario Party and your Mario Kart 64, your GoldenEye, et cetera, really made that system great. It kind of brought competitive multiplayer, to the living room. 4 people. Before that, you'd have to buy some dopey adapter and find a game that works for it, and it was a royal pain.
Yep.
But the GoldenEye, I loved it because it was a first-person shooter. It was the only one I had. Because again, I didn't have a computer that could run these things at that time. I'd just gotten one. But again, when my parents bought a computer, it wasn't for games. It was for homework and word processing and print, and the Grolier's Encyclopedia. Like that's what it was for.
Oh wow, that's a deep cut. Yep.
Yeah, listen to my PC episode. There's some deep cuts in there. That's what it was for, right? So I wasn't playing games on it, like Ski Free, or something like that. That came Minesweeper. But anyway, that was my first person shooter, and I thought it was amazing. Nowadays, you try to play it on original hardware, it is nigh impossible.
Yeah.
It's impossible. It cannot be done. I can't. Next up, Mike Alberton of Games My Mom Found shares his recollections of playing 007 with people who don't normally play games, and then Dan of the Retro Logic podcast shares his pleasant memories of GoldenEye 007.
One of my best memories of N64 is of GoldenEye, but it's also playing with people who weren't gamers. Like there was, at one point, I had family down south, and we'd go down south, and for some reason, my uncle was like, we're going to go rent an N64 from Blockbuster, back in those days. And I'm like, and I don't think I think I had one. Maybe this is what I maybe get one. And then we rented GoldenEye. And it was, I remember playing a little bit with them and playing it there. And it was late at night. My two uncles on my dad's side, him and his 2 brothers, they stayed up way later than they should have, just playing GoldenEye together, killing each other.
That's a cool memory. I love the days when you could rent systems.
Yes.
And they weren't cheap when you rented a system, if I remember correctly.
I don't remember much about it. I just remember that he did it, and it means even more to me because that uncle then passed away later on, a few years later. Or he died early. He was only like 30-something. So he died young.
Yeah.
And so that's one of my later memories with him was playing N64, and so it's always kind of stuck with me too with GoldenEye. To give a personal story about a game that everybody, I'm sure, is talking about already to you.
So back to the N64 and all the good times therein. One of the games I want to really focus on today, because I know you're a fan, even before Star Fox, so maybe we can spend more time on Star Fox, if not today, then another day.
Love to.
Yeah, man, is GoldenEye.
Oh, yeah.
GoldenEye is, for me, one of those kind of foundational games. It was the first time I had played a first-person shooter. I dabbled with Doom a bit at friends' houses, but I was never good at it. This is the first one I had.
A+ alliteration, by the way.
Thank you. Didn't even catch that. And so I'm curious, what was your first experience with GoldenEye? And kind of just give me your take on the game itself in general, and we'll kind of talk a bit about specifics as we go through.
So in order for us to talk about GoldenEye, first I have to talk a little bit about one of my other favorite games, which is Turok.
Oh, man.
Now,
yes.
As much as I love GoldenEye, I don't think I would have given GoldenEye a look if I hadn't played Turok first. Because, Turok was probably my first for FPS. Yeah. And I can't find the words for why I love this game so much. It's kind of a Metroidvania in a way. The way that you do a little bit of backtracking. It's linear, but you do have to do some backtracking and find keys and get your upgraded guns and all that stuff. And actually, fun fact about that is that some of the employees from Acclaim who worked on Turok in Austin went on to help make Metroid Prime for Retro Studios, which is also in Austin. Yeah.
Get out of here.
So there's a little bit of crossover there, and I always like to see those kind of connections in games when I'm like, oh, this is kind of like Metroid Prime, and then well, here's why. But yeah, Turok was just visceral and realistic for the day. And very puzzly and encouraged you to explore. And I was just engrossed in Turok Dinosaur Hunter. I loved that game. I don't even know how I got it. My brother must have bought it because my parents were going to buy me Turok. There's blood.
Yeah, exactly.
But so a year later, GoldenEye comes out and I'm like, oh yes, another game with guns. And it totally took over our lives.
Wow.
We didn't play Mario Kart anymore. We didn't play Wave Race anymore. We played GoldenEye. That was what we were playing. And all-nighters playing GoldenEye. Just no odd job.
No odd job. Because you can't shoot him because he's too damn small. Yeah.
Slappers only. All the things, man. It gave you so much control over your multiplayer experience. Which is relatively new for that kind of, at least on a console, relatively new for that kind of experience where we, and I think Smash Brothers kind of took a page out of that book because there's a lot of manipulation of your gameplay multiplayer wise in Smash Brothers as well. But yeah, just being able to just choose what weapons you want and which levels you want to show up or do random levels or, we went crazy. We went bananas for GoldenEye.
After the break, we talk about the single-player campaign in GoldenEye 007. What? You never played it? Don't worry, Mr. or Mrs. Multiplayer. We have you covered. Oh, my wonderful patrons, the Q to my Bond, the odd job to my Jaws. Y'all rock the house better than a stack full of proximity mines in a tiny corridor. 1,000 thank yous to Pete Harney, Dan from Retrologic Podcast, and Ryan from the Gamers Week Podcast. These exemplars of awesomeness support me on Patreon, and you can too. For just a paltry $2, you can join the collective and become one with the hive mind. Or get early episodes, polls, and the standard suite of Patreon goodness. Patreon.com/A Gamer Looks at 40. Starting us off on the single-player menu, Andrew Craig talks about player agency in GoldenEye 007, and then Greg Stewart returns with some single-player wisdom. Did you play a lot of GoldenEye?
Yeah, but I'm in the rare minority of people who didn't play it in co-op or with other people.
Interesting.
I can think of twice ever that we touched the versus mode.
I played it in co-op, but not a ton either. My brother is much younger than I am. He's 5 years younger. So he wasn't at the age where we could sit down together in front of the TV and play, slappers, or play in co-op. I don't think he played a ton of GoldenEye. I'll ask him when he's on the show next. But, when I got to like college age, which, N64 was what, 96, 7?
N64 should be 94, I think. No, it'd be 96.
Yeah, 96. Okay. So I was 16. Yeah, I was in high school. I wasn't really at the age where I had lots of friends coming over. I just kind of wasn't the household I lived in. I had some friends, but it wasn't like big hangouts. It wasn't like college where that was a different story. Everyone was playing Smash Brothers. Like that was the college experience. But I played it mostly solo too, to be honest with you. My cousins had it. And when I went over to my cousins, we'd always play 4-player. And that's where my co-op memories come from. But that may have been 10, 12 times. Like we didn't see them very often. They lived about an hour and a half away. So yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I really didn't play much co-op on it. Did you enjoy it as a solo experience?
Yeah, I loved going through and just trying to sneak my way through the entire game. I think that a lot of my love for stealth games came from that experience of GoldenEye.
And that's interesting because I know you're a big fan of puzzles. And when you stealth a game, it's like you're solving a puzzle as opposed to shooting your way through it. So that makes a lot of sense in just some of the conversations I've had with you.
Yeah, it would become very much I'm going to play the first level and I'm going to see if I can snipe everyone from a distance without ever alerting anybody or setting off any alarms.
That's cool. Yeah, no, that's that. And that was always a fun experience. I think I oscillated between the two. And it was actually the GoldenEye was one of the first games I played that had actual objectives. Like here are the objectives that you need to complete in order to get through this level. I don't think I'd played a game up to that point that had that kind of mechanic.
Yeah, well, and it was one of those things where before that, video games were just get through. And that was the first time where it was like, okay, you can't just get through. You also have to do this other stuff.
Yeah.
You can make it to the end of the level, but it doesn't matter if you didn't accomplish the things you were supposed to accomplish.
Cool. And it also worked well with the narrative because, again, it's trying to follow the plot of GoldenEye, the movie. So it really worked narratively, too. Like, you just can't blow through and kill all the guys and leave. You have to do some objectives.
Yeah.
That was really, really pretty groundbreaking. Have you tried to play it recently? I've tried to play GoldenEye semi-recently. I think it was a couple of years ago at a video game convention kind of thing. They had it set up on original hardware. Oh my gosh, it is so hard to go back to that kind of playing control style with single stick first person shooter.
I would imagine the lack of camera control would just be infuriating.
It is really, really the idea that you have to stop, hold a button, shoot. It's a very floaty feeling control. I forgot how floaty that N64 stick was. Man, it was raw. I couldn't get through the first level. I'm like, I'm getting shot to death, and I need a second thing. So I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on it when you fire it back up on your beautifully restored N64. One of the things that people don't remember or forget about GoldenEye was the objectives. It was, for me at least, it was one of the first games I played where you had to actually do certain things in a level. You couldn't just blow away everybody and go to the end. Mm-hmm. Like it wasn't just defeat all the bad guys, go to the end. You had to do things in order to
a little more
progress.
Story-based.
Yeah, and it actually followed the movie pretty well as far as the plot goes, for better or for worse, right? It's GoldenEye.
Yeah, now that you say that is one interesting thing about that game that I've always found, like I say, I've always found that interesting about that game is that, because I think the difficulty level was tied to the number of objectives too,
yes.
Right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the harder you put it on, the more you had to do in a level, which was really cool. It was a very interesting way of approaching challenge. Obviously, I think the enemies were definitely had a difficulty amped up, take more damage, deal more damage, etc.
Right.
But you had more things you had to do, which made the game more fun. Like, I gotta escort Natasha from here to here and defuse these 3 bombs, and all stuff that if you played it on a more basic level, there was just, you didn't have to do that. So that was a really interesting innovation that game put forth.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd forgotten about that, but that's a really good point.
Yeah. It's other than that though, it's a slog. I mean, I don't know.
It really is.
People, I've heard podcasts like, why don't they release GoldenEye on the Switch Online? Like, because it's not good.
No,
it's not good.
Exactly.
It's a relatively ugly game. I mean, it did some neat things with like destructive environments. Like you walk into a room of beakers and you shoot all the beakers and they blow up, and that's neat.
Yeah, actually, you know what? That's a good point. I remember that being one of the things that really did sit with me after playing it was the fact that you saw bullet holes all over the place when you fired into the walls and stuff. It's like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Next up, the guys at New Dad Gaming Podcast chat about shooting limbs, and Dan returns to spread even more GoldenEye love.
I remember, again, one of those mind-blowing moments where you could shoot the hats off people. So I remember also shooting people in the nuts, but shooting the hats off people, and then sometimes they would notice, sometimes they wouldn't, and they would just stand there and their hat would just boo, like with the silencer, and just boo, just shooting all the hats off people. I just remember, like, you could aim for any like body part on a person, and they had those weird like photo faces plastered over.
Oh
so
my
I imagine
gosh,
going back to that is kind of nightmare fuel. I don't know, like
yeah, looking at Jaws on and they even had like started bringing like real James Bond characters. I mean, it's a very ambitious game that did a lot for the era, but it's really hard to go back to.
Yeah, I think there's certainly like there's a real thick nostalgia glasses that get put on it, and I think it's much more about the feelings it emotes as opposed to the actual game. Because let's say, I don't know if you've visited, let's say Quake recently, for instance, like that kind of actually still holds up comparatively, right? To a GoldenEye, or even like Mario 60. We're sitting here waxing poetic on Mario just now, Mario 64, and that game's still fantastic. That game is a lot of fun to go back into. GoldenEye is like, there's a lot of problems here as far as the control schemes, but any reflection upon it is just so glowing, and any gamer who kind of came up through the N64, I think, would have the same type of recollection, and hopefully the same honesty.
Yeah, that's fair. And again, it's a beloved game for me as well. So, but man, again, just going back to it with modern thumbs is rough. That's hard stuff. GoldenEye also had I think, a very good and pretty innovative single-player mode. That you had to kind of engage with in order to kind of unlock a lot of things in the multiplayer, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, for sure.
So it followed the plot of the movie pretty closely.
Pretty much.
For the most part.
Things got a little weird at the end. Like they started throwing like other scenes from other movies in at the very, very end. If you yeah. I think they had like those 2 extra. There was like a Moonraker, right? Yeah, the and
there's satellite and something else like Aztec, I think it was called. James Bond. I've seen a lot of James Bond movies in my life. I could not, for the life of me, explain one from the other. I could not tell you the difference between Goldfinger and Russia with Love and Spy That Shagged Me. I don't know. I could not tell you the difference. They're all mushed together in my brain. But from what I understand, it followed this movie very well and pretty closely. One of the big things, though, in this that people don't talk about was the idea of having different objectives based on the difficulty level. That was a big deal. I don't remember games really doing that before GoldenEye. There might have been, but maybe not, I think, as big of a scale.
Well, and that was what my second FPS. And if I'm thinking of other games that are like mission based, Star Fox kind of did that, but you didn't choose your difficulty level. You accomplished things in the level to be able to unlock the harder level next. Right. So it was kind of backwards a little bit from that.
Yeah, in GoldenEye, you, for example, let's say the second
came out first. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say in GoldenEye, for example, if you did a certain level on easy, all you had to do was basically, plant the bomb here, leave.
Right.
If you do it on medium, you'd have to plant the bomb, plant something else, do a thing, and then leave. And on hard, you had like 8 things to do, and you had to successfully complete those objectives, or else you lost. That was it. So, and I don't remember if you lost if you didn't complete the objectives, or if you didn't get a bonus.
Because you have to select your difficulty level at the top. So once you select your difficulty level, you're locked into those missions.
Right.
Like you have to do them. Your save file is locked into a difficulty level.
Correct.
So you could have multiple save files,
with multiple, yeah.
So
that's okay. So that was it then. But that's pretty. I thought that's just amazing. Like that's a really cool conceit. That it's not just making your enemies hit harder or be more bullet spongy. You have to do more things. You have to spend more time here. You can't just run through it on the harder difficulties.
I love that.
And they're all story based, right? So they're not arbitrary. So I think it's such a unique gameplay mechanic.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe you could call it the first objective-based shooter.
Yeah, objective-based difficulty settings. Yeah.
Yes, the Rainbow Six Siege of N64 games.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe there's a lineage there, I guess. And now for the moment most of us are here for. Recollections and memories of GoldenEye's legendary multiplayer. Bobby rejoins the conversation after him, Andy from the Cafe BTW podcast and Twitch stream shares stories of basement gaming sessions. And then finally, Mike Alberton returns to tell a tale of childhood comeuppance.
And especially not just N64, but the multiplayer mode. That was big. That was so
now,
big.
Did we play a lot of multiplayer together? I don't remember.
A little bit. We did.
Yeah, we did play it a lot. It was more like we went to Kevin and Kyle's, to our
cousin's house, and then I had friends who would play. I would play with it too.
Yeah.
I was just talking yesterday. I went bowling last night. I was just playing with our friend Brian Parks, and he used to work at Burger King when he was in high school, and he said, we would actually. After hours, we would hook up the N64 and play GoldenEye at the Burger King. It's in everybody's memories, dude.
Everybody's memories.
It's part of everyone's history. You could do a whole episode on GoldenEye.
I probably could. Yeah,
what's crazy too is like none of the follow-ups worked. there were other follow-up games that Rare put out for other movies later, and everyone went back to GoldenEye.
Like Perfect Dark was kind of like the spiritual, at least not spiritual, spiritual successor, kind of, sort of. And that people say it's good. I never played it. Yeah. But, anything that was GoldenEye after that just wasn't the same. And I think because the multiplayer was so innovative because it was so accessible. Because people always forget, and this is a N64 thing, because a lot of my show is going to be people dunking on the N64. Oh, I hated that system. And I don't understand why.
No, I loved it.
I think it was great. I don't know. I loved it. I still think the controller's pretty neat.
Yeah.
But the big thing that the N64 had that nothing else had were 4 controller ports. Before that, you had to buy the adapter and you string that to the thing. And it came with 4 controller ports because they recognized how important couch co-op was going to be. And Mario Kart 64 took advantage of it. And GoldenEye was... That's why it was good. You brought your controller over, boink, plugged it in. You're good to go. Or... your friend had like those crappy Mad Cats ones that you gave to like, here's one for you. But... I want to jump back to Bond, to GoldenEye, man, because that was a formative game. That was one of the first ones I remember playing because I wasn't a Smash player. I never lived in that world, but GoldenEye was one of the first kind of real intense couch co-op games. Do you remember playing a lot of couch co-op with, again, friends or family back in that era?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
In my basement in Jersey, we eventually had. Do you remember those old big TVs that you would buy and they would be on like wheels and they were kind of like your big projector TV back in those days?
Yep.
So we had like one that was like kind of like hand me down to me that I used in my basement for my 64.
Nice.
And it was kind of like a rundown version of those TVs, but I was like, "Hey, Dad, don't throw that out. Let me use that for my gaming." And he's like, "All right." And like but dude, so we had a big screen for Bond, and it was perfect.
Amazing.
And I want to be clear that I lived in I had one of those basements that wasn't fully furnished, and it would be like a rug, like a random couch, and that TV in the basement. You know what I mean?
Because you lived in Jersey. I had the exact same scenario. It was just kind of half finished. Someone like threw down a sheet of linoleum or something, and that was the story. Man, I totally get that unfurnished vibe, and that's so cool because playing a 4-player on that, you can actually see what you're doing. I mean, I used to play on a little, I guess. It was probably like a 27-inch or maybe a 30-inch TV. And you're squinting at your character as you're doing slappers, you know. That's a cool memory, man. That's awesome. In Goldeneye, what are kind of some of you obviously have some fond memories of playing it, you know, on the vacation. What other memories do you have of Goldeneye that kind of stick out to you?
The only thing, just having friends over and playing it all the time. Or like one time we had these 2 friends that were older than us that were bragging about how good they were in GoldenEye and how they were going to kick our ass. And my friend had found a cheat where you could turn invisible. So he would turn invisible and he killed them. And they were like, how the fuck do you do that? We're like, I'm just that good. Never did tell them.
Oh no, that's
we never did admit it. Because I mean, they were like probably 3 years older than us, so they're constantly bragging about how they're going to kick our ass and they're so much better than us. And then we cheated and beat them, and they never knew we cheated. We never told them.
That's fine. Listen, that's cool. I think that's a great story. Listen, they got a little bit of a piece of their own medicine there.
But again, they were teenagers. We would have been younger. Like let's say here 12, and they were probably 15, 16. So it fits that era.
It's certainly
like age, how you are.
I love that. Multiplayer was such a big deal on GoldenEye. I remember I was in college, I guess 98. Was it 98, 99? Yeah, I was in college, and that was a big deal in college. I didn't dorm at college. I commuted. I stayed home because I went to a school that was 15 minutes from my house. So I didn't stay there. It's a very Jersey thing. Everything's so compressed. You really don't have to go away to college if you live in New Jersey. And so anyway, I save money on dorms and all the rest of it. So I would go to my friends' dorms and they'd always be playing either Smash or GoldenEye. That's what you played, and it was great fun just hanging out and attempting to smack each other slappers only. Do you need more multiplayer? Who doesn't? I mean, come on, that's what we're here for. The fellas from the New Dad Gaming Podcast return to the show to talk about chasing the joy of playing games with friends. Raji, aka Super Nintendo Bros, shares with us a few experiences and thoughts on multiplayer as a whole, and then Dan from Retro Logic finishes the conversation with good points and great memories.
Oh, my lord. I was I just downloaded and started to play a little bit the latest Halo. So the Halo Infinite multiplayer. Mm-hmm. And it sort of feels to me that a lot of guys of our generation, guys coming up with kids now, or just, when gamer dads look at 40, I think anything will be kind of seen through that lens of N64 GoldenEye, 007 GoldenEye, because to capture, I'm about to play a multiplayer game with a bunch of other people with guns, shooting, trying to have fun. And to think back to those days of those 4-player matches within GoldenEye is just, it's so hard to top. And I'm sure there's some layers of nostalgia on it, of course, that, that's going to blur the vision a little bit. But I think just objectively, it's kind of hard to beat how great that game was, how perfect a console it was for it, as far as the 4 controllers built right in, super easy to play it. Mm-hmm. And just getting together. And just the timing, of course, too, like being of that age where it's like, of course we all have free time to sit down and have a 007. So, my God, it just feels like we'll, in some small way, forever be chasing the high that was 007 with buddies back on the N64. I don't know, like, Jeff, how do you remember, what does it hit for you when you do think 007 on N64?
That was like, I can hear the menu music, the dum dum, like, and the Nintendo logo spinning. I love it. Burned into my brain. But it is probably one of the best games, obviously, on N64 that I had ever had, possibly of all time. Just, it was both enticing. The campaign, I played through the campaign so many times because it was just so much fun. So I had that part of it. And then the multiplayer, like you said, Trevor, is just fantastic, right? Getting your buddies together on a split screen on a TV that was probably 20 inches wide. Do you know what I mean? So just the amount of replay value in it, I can remember, like, the maps, maybe there was 12 maps. I remember the screen was full in like a grid, so maybe there was 12 or a little bit less than that. But the combination of the multiplayer maps with the mods you could put in it, like Big Head mode and Paintball mode and all that stuff, and then the weapons that you could, like, all the loadouts you could make to kind of prime the match the way you wanted to play, like slappers only and all this stuff, right? And all the characters just made it like an infinite number of possibilities to my young brain on, like, this is a never-ending game. I love it. Like, I lived that game forever, and I was really good at it. So I know Trevor wasn't.
Whoa, hey!
Oh,
I mean, it's
shots
true,
fired.
but you don't have to say it.
I'm pretty sure if he didn't sell his N64, we could have a Goldeneye tournament. So we
There
should
you
have done
go.
that.
True.
Right?
Maybe we'll save up and sell our PS5s and Xboxes to get one.
I thought you were going to say sell our kids, but okay.
Oh,
I'm glad you went with the better route. Better
Yeah.
man than I.
Fantastic game. Like, again, no words. It was one of those, I would maybe even say Mario 64 moments, right? Like, how could they pack this all into a game off a movie and make it awesome? Do you know what I mean? Like, the rare haired heydays, like, that was their prime. I loved it.
Yeah, they really were in their heyday. It's interesting too, because although I agree with you. Again, I had all those same feels and feelings. I never played it that much in multiplayer. My brother and I didn't play it multiplayer too much. If I went to a cousin's house, we would play it there, or maybe a friend's house. Okay. But for some reason, I just never played a ton of multiplayer. I always remember being really bad at it, much like Trevor, evidently, and having a really hard time seeing my little guy in the corner of the screen on this little tiny, itty-bitty square that I'm supposed to be navigating, and going through levels and hiding and sniping and such. I was going to ask you about Goldeneye. Did you play a lot as when you were a youngster? Yeah.
That game, my friends were honestly into more than I was, but I played a lot of that, and I usually died. And then at some point, probably got super salty and was like, "Whatever, I'm not playing this." And then I'd come back eventually. But that game, right there. I mean, there you go. N64 once again. How many great experiences? But that would not have happened without Doom existing. I don't think. I mean, it's there for a reason.
GoldenEye is pretty foundational. It legitimized console FPSs.
Yes.
Before then, there really weren't any. I'm sure there were, but nothing quite like Doom. Doom. Nothing quite like GoldenEye. And GoldenEye also really legitimized multiplayer FPS, like in death matches and because local co-op problem.
It brought families together. It brought friends together like never before, where you don't have to, oh, you guys are going to play it. Just, well, there's the two you can play. Oh, this sucks. Or I don't want to watch. Well, guess what? There's 4 of us now, like a lot more space for people to get involved. That was revolutionary.
Yeah, totally. It was just GoldenEye was just I've tried to play it like in like retro conventions, they'll have it hooked up to original hardware. It is incomprehensible. I don't know how I did that as a kid. I honestly don't.
In the modern era, I don't know, in the last couple of years, I fired it up and put on like the multiplayer mode. Like, how in the hell did we even see what we're doing? It does not hold up nowadays. It's awful.
It really
But back in the day, it was awesome, damn it.
It was also with the multiplayer, and I'm glad you brought up the customization, because that was a really big part of it. Mm-hmm. I remember we were big into proximity mines, So you could do like proximity mines only or something like that. And it just turned into bedlam where everything would start exploding and the game would crawl to 4 frames per second. And everyone just dies, you know? It's having that kind of control. Yeah, it was pretty rare, even for PC people who, again, people I knew who played Doom online a lot. I don't believe you had that kind of control where you could say, yeah, you know, BFGs only or something like that.
Like maybe something like Unreal, but that may have come out after. No, I don't want to speak. I'm not really sure, but I think Unreal had some kind of customization. Okay. But that wasn't a console game at the time.
Correct.
Did you ever do the thing? Okay, did you ever figure out that you could detonate your remote mines by pressing A and B at the same time?
What?
Yeah.
What?
And we actually found this out by accident. Because one of my friends who's just terrible, he was just awful at Goldeneye. But we always made him play because it was fun to just like hunt him down. We were terrible children.
Of course.
We were doing remote mines in the level with it's a level where Natalia is in jail, and then you go into the room and there's all the computer screens, and then you go outside. It's like a helicopter landing pad.
Yeah.
If you blow up all the TVs in that big room, then your proximity mines float. They don't, when you throw them, they stay where you are. And then if you back up, they're floating in midair. So we do all kinds of crazy stuff with that. But like, you know, you always have to have your detonator out to be able to trap people. Well, you know, I don't know where he learned it, but he had his gun out and he was blowing up mines. And we were like, hold up, bro, what black magic crazy. He's like, oh yeah, I read it in Nintendo Power. You just press A and B. And we're like, listen, you suck at this game. What are you doing reading Nintendo Power? He's like, I'm trying to get better. Like, well, yeah, we were terrible to that kid.
Oh, that's funny.
Jason, if you're out there, I'm sorry. I love you.
Jason, hey man, listen, you know, it's rite of passage. I was terrible at it too. So Jason, you and I are just
got to get good.
We had to get good. I didn't play a lot of multiplayer, and we'll kind of talk about like moving into some of the other things Goldeneye does well. I played it though at my cousin's house, and I had 2 cousins. My brother and I would attempt to play my cousins who played nothing but multiplayer, and they would slaughter us mercilessly as I'm trying to squint at this. And I have bad eyesight, trying to squint at this postage stamp size quarter of a 27-inch screen I'm trying to like pay attention to. Yeah, and were you guys doing a lot of like, you know, screen sneaking or whatever they call it, where you're kind of like glancing?
I mean, and we didn't
all that stuff.
We didn't call it cheating. Like that was part of the game, you know?
Right,
like,
right.
If you're gonna camp, we're gonna find you. So don't do that, you know?
It is a feature, not a bug, as they say.
Exactly. Yeah. No, we used it to our advantage. We didn't frown on it. We like knew it was part of the game. But this was, I want to say, this was the first time where split screen even was like mattered or like was even utilized really. Like if I'm trying to think of like Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis games that use the multi-tap, like Bomberman or most of the sports games, you are all on the same screen. You know?
Did Mario Kart use
Mario? Nope. That was 2-player.
Yeah, right. And you just get kind of left behind.
And so I guess that had split screen technically, but
yeah,
4-player split screen though.
No.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine those older systems having the juice to do it. You know, or just having the processing power to handle that. Unless you want to play, you know, Stunt Race FX.
The juice. Oh man, that game chugged on 1 player.
Oof, man. Isn't it fun racing at 10 frames per second? Like, so wow. Fun. A slideshow.
Crashing was fun though.
Crashing was fun.
Your pieces fly everywhere. Yeah.
And then it would recombine slowly as you're like, come on, I gotta move. But yeah, man. So multiplayer, of course, was a big deal. Do you remember what character you would make? Because you could use the characters from the game, and they were all basically the same. And then you had some other,
there weren't any
default ones.
There weren't any advantages except for Jaws, who was huge, and Oddjob, who was tiny. So you couldn't be any of those. But once you got most of everything unlocked, because you play through the campaign to unlock stuff in multiplayer, yada yada. I would always be a scientist because I just thought the idea of like a scientist toting like 2 clobs was funny.
That'd be pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't remember who I used to. I don't think I did Bond or any like the classics. I don't remember, but I know that was a big deal for a lot of people. And what's your weapon of choice? Was it clobs? Weren't they pretty? I can't remember.
The clobs were bad.
They were
really want to get like a silence pistol or anything automatic. Really, anything automatic besides the clob, which is like horrible for accuracy. But I was an agent of chaos, so anything that exploded. Grenade launcher was amazing. I love the grenade launcher because the rocket launcher is very loud. Like you can't, and it's big, so you can't like sneak around with a rocket launcher. But grenade launcher is the size of a regular gun. The grenades will bounce a little bit. You kind of have some chaos going on there, so you could like ricochet a grenade off of a wall into a different room. Like there was a lot more strategy and tactical gameplay available to you with a grenade launcher. So I think probably grenade launcher. But yeah, I mean, loved mines. We all love doing mines. That was like the best.
Mines are great.
Yeah.
It's such a fun conceit because they're small. You can't really see them. You're running around. Next minute, you know it. You're exploded into 1,000 bits.
Or like you do see them and you try to like shoot them from far away to get.
Yep. Or you see someone running by, try to shoot it as they're running by. Kablams. Yeah.
Perfect.
It's pretty cool stuff. The multiplayer, of course, is pretty legendary. A lot of people remember that game for that reason because multiplayer, especially couch co-op, creates connections. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in my opinion, it creates memories with people sitting around playing the games, and that's why I like talking about it because these stories always invariably come up about your friend who's really bad.
Yeah, some of the best times of my life. Us in our basement playing Smash Melee. Just trying to outdo each other.
After 47 minutes of hemming and hawing, stories and recollections, highs and lows, praise and admonishment, the question still remains, what is GoldenEye 007 to me? We've heard about what it is to most other people, but looking back on it, is it a janky artifact of a long begone time? Or is it this thing we can love even though we know it's not that great? Or is it great? Is it an awesome game that holds up today even if it's still a little hard to hold in your hands? And for me, I boil it down to this. GoldenEye 007 is the game I really don't like, but I really kind of love. And yes, I'm aware it sounds like I'm hedging my bets on both sides of the fence, but hear me out. I recognize all of its flaws. It's not a game I want to play again. If it showed up on the Nintendo Switch Online, I'd probably give it a one quick spin for old time's sake, but I doubt I'd go through the campaign again. I just don't think I would. But I also love it for what it represented, and maybe these are the nostalgia glasses. When you're doing critic stuff, you have to remove those to a certain extent, right? You have to look at it objectively, nuts and bolts. What does this work? But I think in working through this episode, I've realized I can do both. I can recognize the nuts and bolts aren't that great, and I can recognize how much I loved it as a kid. And I can thank GoldenEye for being that first entry point into console FPSs, for being the multiplayer game that I could play with my cousins, and for being the title that introduced a new element to my gaming fandom. Both of those ideas can live in my head with minimal dissonance. And maybe, thanks to this episode and all of the stories we've heard, maybe the same can be said for you as well. Thank you so much for checking out this edition of A Gamer Looks at 40. If you like the show, Twitter should be your next stop. Follow me on Twitter. There's a link tree up there in the bio. Click it. You get links to everything, including my Patreon and including any place to listen to and subscribe to the show. And if you are a subscriber to the show, like, comment, rate, and subscribe. Subscribe twice, clearly, because that's what I just said. Via your pod player of choice. It really helps boost the signal, as my friends at New Dad Gaming say, of the show. Looking forward to our final N64 episode in 2 weeks. It's going to be all about the rando games, all y'all talked about through the length and breadth of these interviews. It's going to be a blast. Make sure you check it out in 2 weeks. Until then, thanks so much for checking out the show, and continue being awesome.